Hello everyone, you're watching Oneindia News. You're watching Global Chit Chat, where we talk about the recent developments in geopolitics with our expert, Mr. Titivesh Singh Maini. Hello sir, welcome back to our show.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
So let's just dive right into it. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he is scheduled to go to Samarkand in Uzbekistan to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, right? So what can you tell us about the development in this scenario?
So, as we always talk about, there's one part about the substance and there's one part of symbolism. Now, this is going to be PM Modi's first face to face meeting with Xi Jinping after the Chinese President Xi Jinping after 2019, right? And you would have seen also that both Indian and Chinese troops have, there's been a withdrawal from Eastern Ladakh days earlier, right? So, first, obviously, in the India-China context, all eyes are on whether, on the sidelines, would there be a meeting between the Prime Minister and the Chinese President? He's also in. I mean, the Chinese President also uh, domestically is facing challenges, but obviously to the outside world, he wants to send out a message that he's in a very strong position. So I think he's going to get a third term. You know, the they're going to have the 20th CPC, and obviously he's going to get it because so that is important. Uh, so that's the India-China part. There has also been talk about India, whether on the sidelines, whether the Indian Prime Minister will meet his Pakistani counterpart. So trilaterally, this India-Pakistan-China relationship has been very since 2021. First, there were attempts between India and Pakistan to improve the relations. Then India, China also, there was talk of some sort of thaw. But in between, a number of other events have happened. Then you had, COVID-19, which should speak. So face-to-face meetings, let's see, what comes out of that. That is one part of it. In the context of connectivity, SCO is important because obviously you have Russia on board. Russia's there, China, even Iran is going to become a member, right? So when you look at the Chabahar port, or whether you look at the international north-south transport corridor, that is India's way of getting access, not just to Central Asia and Afghanistan, but also to Europe. In fact, already some consignments have come from Europe via Russia, and then Chabahar, they've sort of reached India. So that is the connectivity part of it. And then, largely for India, it's also about signaling about balancing out between the West and obviously the West looks at this organization with skepticism because initially SCO began as Shanghai Five, and obviously, China and Russia are important players in this. Though I would also like to add here that there are also fault lines between China and Russia with regard to Central Asia. In fact, before uh, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, you would have already seen Xi Jinping has embarked on a visit of Central Asia. So there are fault lines between Russia and China with regard to China's increasing clout in Central Asia. So, and if I were to look at the SCO, otherwise it represents about 40% of the world's population, 30% of the GDP. You have obviously China, Russia, India, Central Asian countries. Iran is coming on soon. So, and strategically also, these are important countries. Now, this SCO, like other organizations, basically it paves the way. It's useful to for meetings on the sidelines, outside the radar of the media hype. So, for instance, let's say, I mean, we have given the example of India and China. You could earlier India, Prime Minister Modi and Nawaz Sharif, 2015, they had a meeting on the sidelines of SCU. So it's useful in that context. It's useful in the context. It's also a message that how countries with differing, obviously, geopolitical interests. Some closer to the US, some not so close. I mean, India is one perfect example. How they have to do a balancing act, but how because of connectivity, because of trade interests, because for India, obviously it becomes even more important because Iran is on board and India is paying a lot of attention to Central Asia as well. So there are multiple sort of layers to this organization, but ultimately a lot will depend upon for SCO. A lot will depend upon the India-China relationship. At least in certain areas, progress is not possible if the strains continue. Certain areas,
Right.
yes, connectivity, yes, but others, some of the areas, that's not going to be possible. And
Right.
it also remains, then Russia has an even more important role as a result of that. And could this platform be one where Russia, behind the scenes, is a sort of
Mm.
intermediary also between India and China? That is something which remains to be seen.
Right.
So there are
Right.
multiple layers, there are many expectations, but obviously there are, given the current geopolitical situation, there are certain constraints as well. But I think on the whole, it's good in the sense that uh, this whole of the in terms of regional connectivity, in terms of relations with Iran, further giving a boost to that, in terms of taking the connectivity with Iran beyond just the trilateral, beyond India, Afghanistan, and Iran, bringing Russia on board, looking to Europe. So that way, the SU also has importance, and I think it's important. I mean, the most important part is that it sends out the message of autonomy in foreign policy, and in fact, just to end, days before, uh, you also had a meeting of Quad officials in Delhi. So that is,
Right.
that's a reiteration of how the balancing is done in foreign policy.
Right.
Right, right.
Right. Right.
And coming a little farther from India, so the 96-year-old Queen Elizabeth II, she passed away recently, and her rule holds a significance in the sense that when she started off as the queen, her grandfather, King George the Fifth, I believe, he held, like, I think most of the population. He ruled most of the population in the world, and over the years, through her monarchy, through her rule, the British stance have definitely changed, right? So, can you talk about Queen Elizabeth's rule just in context of this?
Okay. So obviously, Queen Elizabeth has, during the period of about 7 decades, she has seen a lot. I mean, so for instance, from uh, President Truman in the U.S. till uh, President Joe Biden. I mean, she's dealt
Right.
with all U.S. presidents. She has dealt
Right.
with, in terms of prime ministers, she saw, from Winston Churchill till
Mm-hmm.
Liz
Mm.
Truss.
Right.
Technically,
Yeah. Yeah. Technically, Lister.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you had somebody who was born in, I mean, if you look at Winston Churchill, somebody who was born in the mid 19th century. If you look at Liz Truss, she was born in 1974 or 75, probably. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
that is just how much. So when there is a reference to her being a constant, this is just a reminder of that. Domestically, obviously, there have been changes. There have been debates about what should be the relevance of the monarchy, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and there have been debates in recent years even about the abolition. But some people don't want to upset the apple cart and
Yeah.
view the monarch as a symbol of stability and continuity. And unless there is something, you know, the argument is that if unless there's a valid reason, I mean, why do away with this institution? And in some form, it's also a how I mean, it would be tough to, but globally, it's an important symbol also of the United Kingdom. I mean, obviously, Commonwealth countries, developing countries within the Commonwealth, they've gotten over their colonial baggage, but the monarchy is an important institution in many ways. I mean, as I said, just in terms of continuity, if nothing else, right? So that is one part. But what you're also seeing is you have, obviously, if you look at the number of Commonwealth members, they are way over. Uh, it's some but 52 to 50, over 50 basically. The realms, if you look at the Commonwealth realms, who consider the monarch as the head of state, right? There is a change over there. So, for instance, there are about 14 now. Last year, also probably Antigua uh, probably got out of this thing of being a realm, and now some of the other realms are also wanting to move towards being republics. So they'll be part of the Commonwealth, but they will not remain realms. So there's a questioning which is taking place in many of, especially even in the Caribbean and the Pacific countries, of whether the monarch should be sort of
Mm-hmm.
head of state. So that is
Yeah.
the change which is also taking place. Prince Charles, personally, I think he has been very active. He's active on environmental issues.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, visited India also on a number of occasions with regard. because of his interest in the environment, wildlife, and so on. And obviously, he is experienced in terms of diplomacy. I mean, in the context of whatever his role was, I mean, obviously, in a written at the end of the day, it's a prime minister, it's a foreign secretary, and all who run. But he's experienced in that context. So I think whatever his limited roles are, obviously, he's comes with quite a bit of experience to that. But I mentioned realms because it also raises how there has been a change and how Commonwealth countries themselves, even those which for very long actually looked at the monarch as the head of state. In fact, even in Canada, where the monarch, the queen was the head of state, and obviously King Charles. There have been questions about whether the some debates about whether the monarch should be, the head of state and so on. So this is
Right.
an it remains to be seen how this happens. But I think, as I said, King Charles now. We used to sing Prince Charles, but King Charles
Yeah, King Charles. Yeah.
has been in not only in his capacity, uh, his royal capacity, but otherwise also he's been associated with a number of these causes. And probably you will see on things like climate change, environment, many other global issues. You will see probably some more, at least interventions, not in the form of policy, but there will be in probably in intellectual form. You will see more interventions.
Right. So you think that this may go go in the not in a bad direction. That's what you're thinking, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to whatever extent, whatever the role is. I mean, as
Yeah.
it is, we have been talking.
Anyway, it's a nominal head anyway.
And
So
as it is, if you look at geopolitics, UK is basically it's it's a little more than a mid. I mean, it's a middle power basically, or now
Right.
you could say it's a swing state at times. It's so its
correct.
relevance is because obviously it has the great powers give it more relevance also because of the historical traditions, because of UK's soft power as well, which it exerts. So that is.
Right. So coming back to the country, so US diplomatic missions in India issued a record-breaking 82,000 student visas in the past 2 months, basically on May and June of this year, which is way higher than the entire visas that we got last year. I think that was around 62,000, right? So what do you think that this insane jump, suddenly such increase in student intake, or suddenly Indian students migrating to US, why has the number increased so much suddenly?
So, the significance of the number needs to be seen in two contexts. One, the drop, as we've been discussing earlier also, of Chinese students enrolling in Western institutions, be it
Right.
not just US, but UK as well, because of, changes to introduce in the visa regime. Now, I think the benefit that, first of all, we need to see if this is a trend. Is it because there was some backlog of applications, or is it because for the time being, this is a reaction to the fact that Canada has refused a lot of visas? Is it that? Or is it because the US has made some very interesting changes, which I would like to just mention, especially for students who are in the STEM, science,
Right.
technology, engineering.
Yes. Yes.
So the first change which has been introduced is that if you have, you know, the number of disciplines which were included in OPT, the optional practical training for F1 visas, 20 more disciplines have been added to that. Now they are linked
Okay.
to analytics, they are linked to climate change, and various other areas as well, right? So that obviously means that while first during the Trump administration, the stance was not only on checking the rise of Chinese students enrolled, but also other students from other countries. But the US has realized that it can't, because China, if you look at it, every year the number of STEM graduates is increasing. Many of them who have actually got some access to technology in the US, they did a few courses here or there. So US has to see that it, on the one hand, it prevents Chinese students coming getting access to US technologies. On the other, if there is a reduction in Chinese students enrolled, for economic reasons and even otherwise, it needs to get a good talent pool from other countries as well for STEM. So you have seen this OPT. One is for F1 visas, even J1 visas also. optional practical training. And then, there is people who are talented. I mean, there is a particular category where people from extraordinary talents. Now they get the national security waiver, which
Okay.
exemption, which helps them to get the green card. So this is happening especially in STEM. Now it remains to be seen. I mean, these are areas where Indian students can actually benefit from these trends. One is just simply looking at the objective that okay, Canada has reduced, so we look at
Mm-hmm.
US is not. The
US
other
increase.
is to take advantage of these
Mm-hmm.
changes which are happening. And as the number of Chinese students reduces, one of the countries which could benefit, because already, I mean, India is a close second when you look at the international student community.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, India is the second largest group. I mean, Canada, of course, they have been ahead. And then, like we've been discussing earlier, that if you look at artificial intelligence, if you look at technology, if you look at the disruptions taking place, even though logistically, Canada has been a favored test, but for students who are willing to get out of the comfort zone and to be part of, because US obviously has advantages still in
Mm-hmm.
terms of innovation, AI, and I mean, China is becoming a competitor. So this could be a great opportunity. And but a lot will also. I'll just add one point, one note of caution at the end, that a lot will now depend also on the next, election, 2024. If you have
Okay.
again somebody who's inward looking, what is
Mm-hmm.
going to happen is you're going to stop. The US will stop the inflow of Chinese students, but you could have again a revision, to the student visa policies, and even again, Indian students would be in a situation where they have to look at other options. But on the whole, I think it's not just the US, but even other, I mean, UK and Australia also, they're going to encourage more talent, especially in the realm of, technology, science, technology, whatever. And there are opportunities. And as we have discussed earlier, that, the students need to look out at these opportunities, because if they, if you look at the conventional approach of academic consultants and all, they are, you know, uh, you look at the routine courses, you look at what is safe, but these are very important. And I would be actually, what we need to see is how long this trend continues of a large number of Indian students getting
Mm-hmm.
US visas. If this carries on,
Right.
then this could signal the fact that US again is emerging as
Mm-hmm.
the number one. It's always, I mean, it's the number one, but Canada, after the Trump administration, had begun to attract more and more professionals in IT and all that. So that could uh, signal something.
Change. Right, right. So thank you so much for all the information that you have imparted with us today, and thank you everyone for watching Global Chit Chat. Catch us again on the next week.